Welcome. My name is Talina, and I am the programming manager here at the church. This is our first official event of 2023. So, and I mean, who better to have as our featured Knowledge Friday speakers than Sag Harbor Express Person of the Year, Kathryn Szoka. We have a ton of exciting stuff coming up this year. Right now we have dancers in residence, Leah Rhythm. They're having an open rehearsal this Sunday, and next weekend they will be doing an interactive dance party and performance. We also, if you see here, we have two works by Almond Zygmunt. She is our January feature artist for Insight Sundays. So on January 29th, she will be giving a talk on these pieces, and they will be displayed in the church for the entirety of January. So now for tonight, along with Kathryn Szoka is her partner in crime, Maryann Calendrille. If you don't know, it's kind of crazy if you don't know, they own Canio's bookstore, which is such a staple in this community. They opened it in 1999 when I was 1 year old. So it has been a part of my life and a part of everyone in Sag Harbor's life. So in 2009, they started Canio's Culture Café, which is an education nonprofit where they have lectures, they have workshops, and they're really just about bringing writers and readers and authors to the community. And I feel like they're kind of the church's partner in crime in bringing creativity and culture and the arts to Sag Harbor. So you guys are about to see some amazing pictures and just see some of the wonderful writers that these women have brought to our community. And we just feel so lucky to work with them every time we have an author here, and we are very, very honored to have them here tonight. So thank you all for coming.
So Talina's just going to start the slide presentation. You'll get a chance to take a look at 20 plus years of events at the store. We lost power that night.
long time ago.
He looks so young.
So you'll hear about some of those writers as we go through our presentation. But first of all, I just want to thank the church for inviting us to be here this evening. We so appreciate their place in the community and their having us partner with them when they have writers, interesting writers here. Planning happens in communities in different ways. Sometimes it's top down and sometimes it's bottom up. And in a way, I feel that, Canios and the church, as Talina said, are very simpatico because we are planning the community kind of from the bottom up, from the grassroots. And together, hopefully we'll continue to make some strides to have our community be the best of what it can be. So just a couple of notes, and do I see Walt Whitman back there? And he is, okay. Nice to see you, Scott. And nice to see so many friends here. It's wonderful. if you think of the history of Sag Harbor, we like to talk about a lot of the different periods that the village has gone through, with whaling being usually the most prominently mentioned and proudly mentioned of our history. There's the whaling, there's the factory era, but the whaling era was very short, and I like to consider that the literary era of Sag Harbor is really the most prominent era of the village's history, if you consider white European history as part of that, as the starting point. We have been a literary community now for 75 years, and Canio's books has been, in a way, a promoter of that from the beginning, and now sort of an accidental archivist of it. And we're very proud and humbled to be there. I think in a way we consider ourselves almost accidental booksellers, but we're very proud of that fact. And before I throw it over to Maryann, I just want to also highlight the fact that Canio Pavone, Maryann and myself are both community-minded educators, and that's sort of, that kind of grounding puts us forward in the community in terms of what we do and what we want to do going forward. But how did Canio get this going?
Okay, I can tell you that story. But I do want to back up and also thank everyone for being here tonight, and thank everyone at the church for inviting us. Watching these slides again with you, these images, I think next time we do this, we'll definitely have music accompaniment. But we've met so many wonderful people, and I feel like tonight, in a way, is a bit of a tribute to many of the people who are part of the Canio's community, who make the bookshop what it is, who make this village what it is. And what you saw there is really just a small sampling of many beautiful photographs that Kathryn has taken of the many, many events that we've been really privileged to be part of. So we have to start with Canio.
It starts with the novel.
It does, yes. So most of you will have at least met Canio on several occasions. So back in 1980, he was teaching languages, teaching full-time, and he was called for jury duty, and he's dedicated citizen, so he fulfills his requirements. He's dismissed early from jury duty, and of course he travels with a book. He brought the book with him up to Riverhead. He had been living further west. Anyway, he's got some free time in the afternoon. He's got the day off, time to take the drive out east and explore this village that he read about in a novel by Joe Pintoro. Never had been out this way before. So I guess it's a warmish spring afternoon, and he's enjoying the drive, and he takes that fateful turn left, as did Steinbeck, we learned, when he first came to Sag Harbor. So, up he drives Bridgehampton Turnpike, the 3 miles from Bridgehampton to the beginnings of Sag Harbor Village. He sees the building of our bookshop across from the Cove Deli, and there's a for rent sign in the window. It's a dusty, sort of dark window. It had been a born-again thrift shop of a sort, vacant for I don't know how long. Maybe some folks here will know that. So anyway, he sees the beginnings of what could be the bookshop that he always dreamed he would one day be part of. So he had a trip coming up as a school teacher. He was taking a group of students to Greece for a school trip, and he said to himself, well, if that sign is still here when I get back from Greece, maybe I'll open that bookshop. So to me, the fact that he just kind of left that up to, the gods and goddesses, to hold that space for him, I don't know how long the trip to Greece was, let's say 10 days or who knows. When he returned to Sag Harbor, of course, the for rent sign was still there, and he began the shop. It was open only weekends. He was still teaching full-time. He would come out on Fridays and at some times slept over in the bookshop and, really made it a second home. So, Canio remains an important part of our bookshop. He has officially retired. Of course, he sold us the business, offering much guidance and advice to us as we took over, but he still takes a day at the store on occasion, so you'll be happy to come and visit him.
Yeah, and I'd like to say that to go a little bit further forward within Canio's time at the store, he gave the very first reading that he gave was in 1981, and the person who gave the reading was Nelson Algren. Nelson Algren, famous, he lived the last several months of his life in Sag Harbor Village. And there's a great story about how he one day wandered by the bookstore in his robe because he just lived right down the street. And he walked into the store and he said to Canio, he said, "I have more books in my bathroom than you have in this store." So then several hours later, he comes back, he's in street clothes with a bag of books that he donates to the store. So in 1981, when he told Canio he would give a reading, 2 weeks before, he was inducted into the American Academy of Arts and Letters. So the store was mobbed with people that, Canio had no idea would be coming, and I think he borrowed chairs from the funeral
parlor.
home,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
to accommodate everybody. And Nelson insisted on charging $3 to everybody who came. And then afterwards, he took everybody down to Concador to have a pizza. So anyway, that's a nice little sort of a folklore.
Yeah, and they became fast friends. I mean, sadly, Algren, died shortly thereafter. He was not here very long in Sag Harbor. Of course, he's buried at the Oakland Cemetery. So that marked the beginning of the bookshop.
And in the 80s, there was really not a lot happening culturally in Sag Harbor. So a lot of people would go every week to Canio's, no matter what was there, just to have that outing. And you might have noticed in the slideshow a gentleman by the name of Colin Asher, a young man who has really studied Nelson Algren through a lot of his lifetime and wrote a biography and did a reading at the store just recently. So it was a nice kind of full circle for Colin to be out here celebrating Nelson Algren. So, okay, if it started with a novel, as far as Canio goes, how did we end up there? Well, it kind of started with a dream or a vision. Maryann and I both had talked a lot about opening in Sag Harbor a cafe for the arts, for poetry readings, for exhibits. And around the time that we were discussing this, Canio put the bookstore up for sale. So we had taken a trip to meet with friends down in the DC area, and one of our friends herself was going through a change in her life from a very intense job to deciding that she wanted to pursue her art more seriously. And so that weekend we spent a lot of time talking about what do you want to do with your life? What matters most? How can you make the most of being in a community in an artistic and creative way? So we came back from DC, and well, what can I say? I was driving to the transfer station, and there was a space right outside Canio, so I just pulled the truck over, and I went in and I sat down and I had this conversation with Canio, and he was immediately thrilled that Maryann and I were interested, and how many people here know Canio Pavone? Okay. Those that do know that he has an infectious personality that is incredibly positive, and for those of you that don't, you now know that I've told you that. He's really a remarkable man, and so he felt that we would make a wonderful pair to take over and fill his shoes.
Yeah, if I can just jump in there. I think the term accidental booksellers is really appropriate. It's been said, we're both educators. I had been teaching, English and writing, Kathryn with your photography and other work. We did have this sort of fantasy about, like, well, wouldn't it be great to have this sort of artsy cafe place, but without a real, like, no business plan, okay? But we both knew the bookshop. We knew the bookshop well, and we knew Canio. We were customers there. The bookshop already meant a lot to both of us, for different reasons. It really was part of my own education as a younger person. I was introduced to a number of writers by Canio. I took Italian lessons with him. My mom worked with his daughter. We were very close, and so, the notion of, for both of us, I feel it was a real effort at community and cultural preservation, because we could not imagine the village without that bookshop. It was just so much about the identity of the place and had meant so much to us. So just to suggest that there was a relationship with the man before. We didn't just like walk up off the street, but there was that open parking place, so that made it all possible.
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, we really did feel strongly that, Canio's was an important part of the village, and we wanted to make sure that if we could do something to preserve that, then we wanted to do that. So what's the first thing we do after we take over the store? Well, a few months later, we go on vacation. But we go on vacation to San Francisco. And San Francisco has, you can't walk a block without, encountering a independent bookstore. So it was an amazing experience for us, and education. We talked to a lot of booksellers out there, picked their brains. They were so supportive, just like Canio. They helped us tremendously, and it was a wonderful way to really excite us about coming back and doing new things with the store and continuing what we thought was really good about the store.
Yeah, and again, to emphasize the exuberance, the ignorance, the naivete. Sure, why don't we just try this? But we felt it was a way that we could bring our talents, and for me, I really do see the bookshop as kind of an extension of my teaching. It's the greatest pleasure in the world to help connect a curious reader with an interesting book that you feel will help encourage their interest or challenge them in a way or affirm that person in some way that's important to them. So, we were warmly welcomed by the San Francisco booksellers. We thought, who are these two, and what are they doing? We could have taken that same trip in New York at that time. Of course, we knew some of the bookshops in New York, but we have to credit them at that time, and then later in our tenure for being tremendously supportive. There's a special feeling among booksellers that is a very close affinity that's hard to define, but we're a pretty good bunch of people, and anyway, fewer and fewer of us, but just to pay tribute to some of the people along the way that were instrumental to us being here right now.
Right. So once we started the store, we made some changes, not in terms of the physical layout, not so many, but of course, back in 1999, social media did not exist, right? Okay. There was no Facebook or Instagram. But we launched a website, we brought back the gallery, and we tried to get as many interesting and thoughtful and diverse writers and artists in the store as possible. And then, I guess it was around 2009, we felt the need to, in order to solidify the presence of Canios in the community, we launched our not-for-profit. So Canio's Cultural Café is our educational not-for-profit, and it underwrites all of the educational opportunities and events that we have at the store, including workshops, seminars, the Moby-Dick Marathon, and things of that nature. And we did that because we could sense in 2009, if anybody remembers, that was a time of economic recession came on board, and we just thought it would be a good way to maintain a brick and mortar presence in a village that was also changing around us. In 2009, it was a different village than it had been in 1999. So Canio's Cultural Café has really been a very helpful sort of leg on the stool for allowing us to continue to go forward and thrive in Sag Harbor.
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, reflecting as we've done to prepare for tonight and just thinking about 2+ decades at this effort. Certainly, the effect of technology has been huge. I mean, Canio had this article on the wall. The writing was already on the wall about brick and mortar bookshops, let alone the recession. This is the rise of Amazon at that time. When we began, we did not even have a website. We used a Rolodex. Any of you know what that is? Young people don't know what that is. We have a solar calculator on the table. That's our cash register. Very low overhead. This is the key to success, low overhead. But anyway, we were already thinking ahead to an extent in terms of securing what we do in a different way. So there were maybe just 1 or 2 other models of that kind where bookshops had a nonprofit entity.
I think there's another trip that we took where we discovered, we started realizing that we found some bookstores that were strictly non-for-profit and 1 or 2 who were sort of a hybrid. But now a lot of bookstores have become hybrid models. And so I think it's a trend, and I think it's an important trend. Actually, in Europe, they value their bookstores and their booksellers, and a lot of them are, not-for-profit and supported by the governments.
So, okay, other changes, other developments. Do you want to talk about the cultural district?
In 2015 or 2014...
Person of the year.
So how many of you remember Eric Cohen, who worked at the library? Show of hands here. Okay. So at the John Germain Library back in 2014, 2015, Eric came up with an idea to launch the Sag Harbor Cultural District. And it's a terrific idea. It's kind of in hiatus at the moment. But the original idea behind the Cultural District was to draw attention to the organizations, the nonprofits that were outside the main commercial part of town, like the library, like the Customs House, like the Whaling Museum, and like Canio's Cultural Café. And so we actually met monthly for very many years, and we did a number of events each fall to celebrate the Cultural District. So it was at that time that we started really partnering with a lot more institutions to do programming, whether it was programming in the store or whether we went to their sites to do the programming. But the collaborative nature of events became a lot more popular, and we like to be being involved as a team member in those things. And another thing that was really nice about the Cultural District was, first of all, it was so popular that not only were organizations that were outside the main commercial part of town involved, but everybody in the main commercial part of town wanted to get involved. And so they did. We said, the more the merrier. So we had everybody joining, and it was really quite nice. And it allowed us to know who was doing what. So in other words, we wouldn't have, let's say one weekend when 5 organizations were planning fundraisers, and things of that nature. So it would be great to kind of resurrect that. So I'll just put that out there as a thought bubble for us all to consider. But that's something that we were a early partner in joining and in managing.
Yeah, I think we see a lot of development of that same concept taking place today. I just want to tell you, we could probably talk here for quite a while. We have lots of pages of notes, but we are going to invite your questions, and if there are things you want to know in more detail, we'd be happy to take your questions in a little bit, or if something arises, please feel free. Maybe...
Sag Harbor is.
Yeah, I was just going to get to the book because... we thought there was this terrible conflict with this great movie showing at the SAG Cinema, which we're fans of, The Dead, the adaptation of James Joyce's wonderful short story, John Huston's beautiful film. Why am I mentioning that? Because this book that we were lucky enough to put together in 2006 was the concept of a dear friend of ours, Jim Monaco, who's passed on now, but Jim was a film expert. He wrote an influential book that's used in film courses called How to Read a Film. It's in maybe its 13th or 14th edition with Oxford University Press. And, as a hobby, Jim, who lived in the Mount Misery area, was publishing books about the East End. He has a wonderful list of natural history, of communities in Montauk. There's a trail guide, South Fork Trail Guide, many, many books that celebrate this area in a way that no one else was doing. And so Jim came in the store one day. We didn't know this guy. He had a sort of big fedora on and was...
Think Peter Falk is Columbo.
Right. Peter Falk walks in and says, I think you should do a book on Sag Harbor. And I thought, okay. I knew Jim because of the books he published by Mike Bettini. Some of you who go on trail walks and nature adventures and kayak rides and all that will know Mike Bettini. So anyway, Jim approached us and said, yeah, we were writing Spyglass at the time. Right. This was a community column for the Southampton Press, which was a lot of fun, mostly. We had to come up with 700 words about the village every week. And
you wrote the articles.
Well, we did it. It was a collaborative effort.
I took the photos.
Yeah, we did some great interviews with the firemen celebrating their anniversary. Okay, that's another program. So yeah, I forgot all about that. Any case, Jim Monaco said, put together a book, articles about Sag Harbor. I thought, oh my God, that's impossible. It would be, it would fill volumes. How can I possibly do that? Just thinking of, encyclopedic history of the village. Anyway, Jim had this great way of just getting to the heart of the matter and helped, put some parameters around the project. Kathryn's photographs illustrate the book, and it was just a great pleasure. We have pieces from Herman Melville and Bill Mulvihill, to suggest a span of time. It was just a delight, and working on it helped, for me anyway, kind of define what is unique and wonderful about the village. Again, this is almost ancient history, and when I read the preface, it sounds a little quaint.
However, I would just like to say that it's the only book that really celebrates the literary history of Sag Harbor. So far. And so hopefully there will be more that will come out.
We did have plans for volume 2 because we collected quite a lot of material, and sadly that's still kind of an unrealized project. But interestingly, the cover of this volume shows, I don't know, can anybody identify that? Okay, so this is Joyous Guard, Steinbeck's writing studio, foreshadowing, little did we know. I think now... you want
So
to talk about
that is a perfect opportunity for me to give a little bit of a commercial break and talk to you about supporting, preserving John Steinbeck's home. Most of you know that we've had this effort ongoing for almost 2 years now, and we're very, very, very close to realizing this dream. We are going to have a public hearing on the 24th of January at the Southampton Town Hall at 1 p.m. We need people to come out and let the board know that you support their acquisition, because they have the public hearing is to have people comment on their use of community preservation funds on the project. So come out on the 24th at 1 p.m. And also, someone earlier gave me a check. Please, if you have a checkbook, I'm happy to take checks for it. We do still have a gap of about, not that much, under 200,000, I think. I'm not sure exactly. So we're getting very close. $1,000 will get your name on a brick, and $2,500 will get your name on the wall inside. Anyway. But so thanks for indulging me on that. One of my partners swore to me to have to say this tonight, so I had to put it out there. That is on the Steinbeck Committee. But I just want to say about Jim Monaco, if I could, he is one of the most under-celebrated and acknowledged Sag Harbor literary individuals. I mean, this man, you would never know it by looking at him, but he was at Cannes, he was at all the festivals, he knew everybody, and he just didn't really toot his own horn, and he was good friends with us, but in addition to all of his voluminous film history, he was a technologist. He did a lot of early technology work, and he was a naturalist. He started the Long Island Nature Organization Conference. So he's kind of a visionary, and hopefully maybe one day we'll actually be able to celebrate him in more duly. But anyway, Jim, thank you. So one other thing we want, before we go to questions, if you don't mind indulging us, we just want to talk a little bit about the careers that we've seen take off in the time that we've been there, because I think it's kind of one of the most gratifying things. And as educators, to see people go from, their first work to their fourth or 14th is really a great pleasure. So Maryann, who would you take it away?
Yeah, we can really be here all night. So I'm going to first. I have to say though that the Steinbeck project is huge. It's not an indulgence. It's a tremendously important effort. Kathryn, that you have been passionate about for several years now, and it's so gratifying. We are just this close. It's very, very exciting. We should mention Moby-Dick a little bit, but in terms of the tremendous gratification of following and seeing writers develop, when we first met Alan first, he was very well known in the UK, but his books were not as popular as they are now in the United States. So, many of you will know Alan, and he's been a longtime Sag Harbor resident. But to see him, reach the acclaim and recognition that he very much deserves, might be one of the first sort of career developments that we were privileged to witness. Certainly Colson Whitehead, he had been a customer of Canio before, we even were in Sag Harbor. And my goodness, multiple Pulitzer Prizes, just a tremendous, tremendous talent. He's been so supportive of our bookshop, has read from each of his books at the store, and with the Nickel Boys acclaim, we held that event with our partners, the Unitarian Universalist Meeting House, just a few miles down the turnpike. Tremendous, tremendous event, especially gratifying for someone of his genius to be recognized as a young African-American writer, and onward he goes. His sense of humor, his humility and grace is just tremendous. So that's been a pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, Colson, we hope one day will be, another Nobel Prize winner, so that Sag Harbor can claim too. So we'll hope for that. But he also has lent his name to the project to preserve the John Steinbeck home, and that's been very, very helpful with our efforts going forward. And there's been many others.
Yeah, I want to mention, because a few folks will be here from the arts community, a dear beloved late friend, Robert Long, an art critic with the East Hampton Star. And Robert wrote a beautiful book, which sadly is now out of print, called De Kooning's Bicycle, which is a collection of essays about the writers and artists of the East End. Probably one of the most gratifying nights of our tenure at the bookshop was the night that Robert read from his book, and we had a full house. And most people in the audience take pictures of the writer. Robert, at the end of the event, had a little camera, and he took a picture of the audience, and I was just very moved by that. There are many stories of writers, thinking also, I guess, of Simon Van Boy. You saw several images of Simon in Kathrynn's slide collection. Was a student at Southampton College, won some early awards, was first published by Barbara Wurzba. Some of you will remember Barbara of North Haven, a writer, editor, and teacher herself. She first published a small chapbook of Simon. And he's gone on now to publish with the likes of HarperCollins. His new book is out with David Godine. He's published maybe 12 volumes of short stories, novels, essays. Tremendous talent, gracious young man, and how lucky are we to just sort of watch that develop. Those are some of my hits.
Yeah. No, I would agree, and I'll just mention one more in that line, and that's Susie Merrill here from Sag Harbor, because she has really grown in her work over time. And how great is it that Shirley became a feature film? I mean, it couldn't happen to a better person. She teaches now with Stony Brook, and we're hoping she'll join us for a program on women and the relationship with the novel Moby-Dick when we get to our Moby-Dick Marathon, which is, get your calendars out, June 9 to 11 this year. So we're really looking forward to that. And I mean, one of the things that the Cultural Café allows us to do is to expand our programming. And so in addition to the Moby-Dick Marathon, we both teach workshops. We've had book discussion groups for many years now on racial justice. We are partners in a group called Racial Justice East End, and we have read over a dozen books on the subject, which has been very educational, very humbling, and very important to engage in at any time, and in particular at this time. And I'll just mention that after a certain number of years, you start to see trends. And I would say in the time we've been at the bookstore, a trend that stands out from all others is the sustained interest after the murder of George Floyd in our customers wanting to read about racial issues, wanting to read about white privilege, and white fragility. It was more than any other phenomena. We had people coming to us looking for that education.
Yeah, that was a tremendous experience. As booksellers nationwide, I mean, this phenomenon was reported. Again, in the interest of time, I'm just going to suggest that we talk a little bit about why we do Moby-Dick, and then we really do want to open it up to your questions before our time is up. So I'll just say that, when we first took over, people were forever coming in the store. When are you going to do Moby? When are you going to read Moby? And we hadn't thought really about whether we would continue Canio's long-standing tradition. It had reached a point of expansion, and then he took a pause on the marathon after some time. It was not, top of mind when we took over, but year after year, people were asking, and we thought, oh my goodness, we have to respond. It came about when we were planning a celebration of an anniversary of the shop. Was it the 20?
It was in 2015.
2015, so you'll do the math on that.
25,
it was some big anniversary, right? And we thought, okay, we're going to do the Moby-Dick Marathon. Canio, Tom Clavin, Val Schaffner were some of the original creators of the event, and as many of you know, the book mentions Sag Harbor several times. I have to admit, I wasn't a fan at the beginning. And I struggled through it in school. I was like, I'm not reading this book. But the experience of the marathon opened it up for me. Hearing the language, the enthusiasm, meeting people from all over, for whom this book was something so important that they had a ritual to read it, let's say, every year. And the more we got into it, the more we loved it. We took a trip up to New Bedford, where right now, tomorrow...
Today, it started, their Moby-Dick Marathon.
Right, but tomorrow at noon, they begin the reading. They do a 24-hour around-the-clock event. We thought, we're not doing that. Canio did that, 20 years ago. People came in their pajamas at 3 in the morning. We're just not going to do that. So we had this very sensible idea, spread it out over 3 days, invite more people to participate, go to sleep at night like normal people, and come back and, start it again. How did we get the idea of making it a movable feast?
Well, first of all, just to step back, I want to say that the Canio's Books is one of really the first institutions in America that has held Moby-Dick Marathons. We held them, the bookstore held them before New Bedford, before Mystic Seaport. So that's incredible cred, and we are mentioned in David Dowling's book about the phenomena of the Moby-Dick Marathon. And early on, we did partner with the library, and we did a couple of marathons with them. Again, a more civilized version. It was not round the clock. But, we thought it would be great fun to move it around. And we have a whaling museum. We have an old whalers church. And we have the library who, promotes the books. So we just thought it would be a good thing to do. So that was one of it. And last time we had it here at the church, we had an amazing celebration, and Laurie Anderson performed, and who knows, hopefully she'll be back again this time.
So how many people here have participated by reading in the marathon? We have reader veterans. Okay, this half of the room, it's okay. Folks over here, the challenge is on, okay? So June 9 through 11. And this was the half of the room that knew Canio. Okay. So you need to mix it up now. So we love the marathon now. We're totally into it. And we've been up to New Bedford many times. Go.
But I would just also like to say that I, too, was never a huge fan of the book, and every time I read it and reread it, the brilliance of the language and the tale. It's really about a folly, about a madman taking a boat, a community, a country on a doomed voyage. And doesn't that sound familiar? Just living through what we just lived through. And so, again, as educators, I'm really interested in opening the book up to people who might have been challenged by it, who might have gotten, the first 3 chapters or the first 12 chapters and then said, I can't read about the cetology. We want to just try to open it up for people and to hear the language out loud, especially with the, actors or people who read well. It's remarkable. But maybe we should ask for questions.
Yeah. We'll open it up, and I'm not good at this, but Tony, I see your hand. And here comes a microphone, so... yes, you do. Yes, you do.
Okay.
Tony? Around here. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. We saw pictures of some of the writers that read at Canio's, so if you want to hear them, East End Inc. is a program on the radio. It's online. And if you go to soundcloud.com and hunt for East End Inc., you'll be able to hear some of the earlier programs. Or you can go to moreeastendinc.blogspot.com online.
Yeah. So thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Tony.
Tony Ernst is the programming director at WPKN, and for years he has put together, he has recorded events at the bookstore and edited them down and put them on the radio and now also online. So just Google East End Inc. WPKN and you'll find the link.
And we're very grateful to you, Tony. Thanks.
Thank you.
Grania, and then, I'm sorry.
Just wanted to say, sorry.
It's okay.
Here's the mic,
Kathryn, in your email that you sent out about Hemingway's home, Steinbeck, sorry. You gave the email addresses of the people to whom one could send an email, which I did. So you might want to tell
Thank you.
people that.
Great, yes, so just if you cannot come on the 24th at 1 p.m., you can send an email to the town clerk and talk to me afterwards. I can clue you in about the actual addresses about it. You can also attend via Zoom because they do have a portal to allow you to do that. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question. Hi, it's an in-house question. But it's nothing to do with the church. I'm just really curious, when did you guys come to Sag Harbor and what brought you here? What was the very beginning of your journey to this village?
We'll keep that part short. I was here teaching. I came in about 1985. 1985, I lived in a wonderful apartment on Palmer Terrace. In terms of the changes, just briefly to mention, the fact that there was a reasonably affordable apartment to rent in the village was what made it possible for me to be here. One by one, the places I lived in were bought up, and many of these old Victorian, big houses were compartmentalized into apartments, and so what's happening with all of that. Affordable housing, another program.
Well, similarly, I first started coming out here. I had been in the city in the early 80s and gravitated to Sag Harbor because of the beauty of the built environment that was here, and it was cheap. And it was like the Unhampton. It was like, it's hard now for people who may have just come here in the last 5 or 10 years to realize how different it was from the other villages. But, one of the essays in the book by Carol Williams, who is a longtime Sag Harbor writer and resident and community person, her essay talks about how, the spider web of the streets and the way Sag Harbor, all the streets kind of converge down in the wharf. It kind of grabs people and it holds them here. So the Turnpike, Madison, and Hampton Road just all converged down into the harbor, it really made, again, accidental planning, but it made for a beautiful community and one that really fostered people being in each other's company. And it was cheap.
Nada.
Two things. First of all, a check can be sent to P.O. Box 182, the Sag Harbor Partnership. And mark on your check, if you send it, Steinbeck House, please, so it doesn't get confused with anything else. And any amount of money is needed. I just have to make a very funny story for a second. When Grania, by mistake, and some of you know this, mentioned Hemingway's name instead of Steinbeck, I knew John well. And at the Old Whalers Festival, a young lady wanted to go down and get his signature, which she was not supposed to do at all, but she looked very pretty and somehow got aboard the ship, the boat actually. And said, Mr. Hemingway, will you please sign this piece of paper? I just had to add this. Somewhere in this world there may be something signed thinking it's Steinbeck. Sorry.
That's great, Nada. Thank you. Nada Barry of the wonderful Wharf Shop on Main Street.
And Nada has been a big force in our effort to get Steinbeck's home preserves. Thank you, Nada.
This has been really great, and I just want to thank you. I've learned a lot about Canio books from this presentation. A couple of things. I'm wondering if you've seen The Whale at the Sag Harbor Cinema?
Not yet.
Because
no.
Moby-Dick is a very major part of that story and of the protagonist's obsession. So you might be interested in that.
We'll be going to see it, absolutely. Thank you.
But my question is really, where do you see Canio books 25 years from now? What would be your hope for the bookstore?
You know, we can't, you know what, we can't project that far in the future.
Well, why don't we say 10 years from now?
Well, you know, listen, we hope the store thrives for as long as it's possible to thrive, and that people support us.
We always have an eye out for, some younger folks who might be interested and be happy to mentor them. I mean, it's a labor of love. We love what we're doing. It's a great privilege. It's been 22 years, and hey, I'm ready to go another 22 years, but who knows? It is quite gratifying to have younger people coming in. As we've seen writers' careers develop, we've seen children develop. Little elementary school kids are in college and beyond. We've seen. We've lost many beloved friends. The demographics are changing in the village, but it's quite gratifying to see younger people, let's say, coming summers to visit from New York, who really get the shop, really love it, and we're welcoming them to consider what it might be like to run such a place.
Yeah, I'd just also like to say, to just take a step back. I mean, when we first took over the store, like within several years, the demise of the book was, it was on every headline of every paper that we read, because the e-book was going to essentially make the paperback book go the way of the horse and buggy. And, we're here to report that has not happened, and it is really interesting to watch that young people, more than people, let's say 40 to 50, want to read a paper book. Studies show you actually retain information much better if you read in the book form as opposed to the e-book. And I think that young people, kind of get the fact that you are uninterrupted when you read a book as opposed to when you read a device.
And also they're just sick of being on screen, so they're interested in taking a break from the screen.
Right.
Talina, did you want to?
You actually just answered my question. I was going to ask about at what point you saw technology kind of affect reading and books within the younger generation, but you answered it very well, so thank you.
It has been an evolution. It was anxiety provoking for a while. Jason Epstein had the idea of his espresso machine. Booksellers would be publishing books, and I didn't know what the future held, but we hang in there. We do what we do, keep a very low overhead, and here we are. So, Kate. Yeah.
Maryann, I'm just wondering the relationship between the Canio's Cultural Café and the bookstore.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, the Cultural Café is a non-for-profit, is an educational non-for-profit, so all of the programming that we do is under the auspices of the Cultural Café. I mean, it's a cafe, and it's not like the store is divided in two, like, cross that line and you're in the cafe, cross this line, you're in the bookstore. But it's really a way to allow us to be able to underwrite the events that we do throughout the year and maintain a brick and mortar presence in the community.
So donations can go to the not-for-profit.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we
they're
encourage that too.
Tax deductible. I mean, it's kind of like a museum, and they have a gift shop, that kind of, but flipped. Sir.
I'm curious. There's a gazillion books in the world. You have a very small shop. How do you curate your books?
Yeah, it's
difficult.
It's so much fun. It's great. It's serendipitous. It's a lot of things. First, our eyes and ears are open for learning what our customers are interested in. We know many of our customers, so we respond to things that we think our customers would be interested in or that they have mentioned. But maybe more than that, I mean, on the one hand, because we're so small, I don't feel the responsibility to provide every New York Times bestseller that a customer can find at another place. Each bookshop has its own personality. I feel this great privilege that we basically bring forward things that we are interested in. Number one, things that are well written. I'm a pretty picky reader. I cannot tell.
That's true.
I'm not going to waste my time on, anyway, I shouldn't get into that. We pick things that we believe in, that we're interested in, that reflect our passions. We developed the nature and environment section because that's something we care about. We've developed a spirituality section, again, looking for good literary quality in whatever we choose. But, we're not going to have everything for everybody all the time, and that's kind of the agreement, going in.
I have a follow-up question.
We'll let you ask it.
Thank you. Have you ever considered a Canio prize for some aspect of literature?
Say more about what?
Like a Booker Prize
picking
or,
a book.
Et cetera. It's something where you're identifying exciting, whether it's like new works or, honoring older writers, et cetera, but that you would sort of, put together a thing that both acknowledges the talent and awards a financial prize, et cetera, and along those lines. There are obviously a lot of examples of literary prizes. So,
love the idea.
Me too. We'll have a meeting and we'll get back to you on that.
No, that'd be wonderful. It'd be a delight to do something like that, to shine a light. And so we'll just need some underwriting there. I will mention just briefly, Canio himself had a publishing operation when he began, and he published a list of 20-some local writers, mostly poetry, and that was his way of shining a light on particularly local East End talent. It's another way not to make a whole lot of money, and so we did not take that on. So.
But
only one of those.
We have had a few contests for young people, and actually for all peoples, to write about over the course of our time there. But I like that idea.
Well, it's just a way of asserting both the extraordinary literary history that is the fabric of this town, as well as the institutionalized aspect of it that comes through the work that Canio did, that you did, et cetera, to keep it going in a way that, it's a kind of validation both of talent to the craft and talent to the institution that recognizes that.
It would be a lovely thing for the Canio's Cultural Cafe to take on. So
An idea is forming right here, right now. So, yeah, we'll do it.
First time I thought of it.
Great. I like it. We can grow this. Yeah. Anybody else?
On just taking the thread of school children and engagement with the community, I'm just curious, how does the public school system engage with the literary history of Sag Harbor, and if you're aware of that at all, or are you involved in it at all?
Well, we have students that come into the store, and I mean, the public schools have such a curriculum that they have to be attentive to, that a lot of times there's not as much opportunity for them to interact with community organizations. But we're always open to that. In fact, we're planning now the marathon for June, and we're thinking, how can we get some of the students to come and read, in the marathon? So we always have our eye out for how we might be able to do that. And a lot of times it's about relationships. So for, teachers come and go. Another thing having to do with housing. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of the teachers that used to live here, they can't live here anymore. So they come from away, and at 3 or 4 o'clock, they've got to drive 2 hours back to where they live. So, I just see that as just one of the unintended consequences of the community's lack of housing for people that work in the community and make the community what it is. But that's a great idea, and we endeavor to always try to have more outreach. We do pretty well with Ross School, and we know some of the teachers who live here, and they bring their students in. Do you teach there? No, okay. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for being here tonight. There are books for sale in the back, and as you heard, the Canio's is a nonprofit, and they take donations. So.
Hey, we also have T-shirts, but thanks everybody for coming.